So good morning. We are talking about life groups for 2 Sundays here. We started last Sunday, and we were focusing last Sunday on the size of life groups. They're typically small by definition, say around 8 to 12 people, give or take. And that does a number of things. Number one, it is following a biblical precedent. So Jesus had his life group, the 12 disciples. It's a small group that he was pouring his life into and doing life with. And also the early church that we read about in the book of Acts had a small group structure. We know that because they were meeting in people's homes. And so that limits the number of people that you can have. We also said that love is actualized in a small group. So the 59 one another commandments: love one another, care for one another, pray for each other, confess sin to one another. All of those kinds of things are more likely to be expressed in a small group environment or setting. We also said that church growth is facilitated through small groups because it allows us to bring any number of people into the congregation. They're scalable, and you can do pastoral care at a grassroots level because 8 to 12 is a reasonable span of care. So it allows the church to expand and expand and expand. No limit to how large the church can grow, depending on how many people the Lord sends. So that was last Sunday. So we were talking about life groups, encouraging people to sign up for life groups back here on the back tables. Sign up continues today. Now, as we finish off this 2 Sunday emphasis, today I want to talk about life skills in life groups. Let's say we are going to commit to a life group. What are the skills that we need to bring to the table or that we can? And I'm going to look at 3 of those life skills for life groups in James today. That's going to be our starting point. And if you're not going to be able to participate in a life group, this is still for you. These are the kinds of things that can help us in our families, our marriages, our parenting, in our neighborhoods, with our coworkers, the church in general, one-on-one relationships. So I think there's application for everyone. But life skills for life groups. Number 1, active listening. Active listening. We want to bring that to our group. James 1:19. James says, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak. So we want to be good listeners. Other people are going to be talking in the group. We want to listen with the goal of understanding where they're coming from, what they're saying, maybe what their experience is, the application that they are drawing. Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes love. Proverbs 18:13, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. Now, let me just give you an example. Suppose you go to an optometrist, you're having trouble with your eyes, you sit down and say, look, things are getting kind of blurry for me. And the optometrist says, tell you what, I've got these glasses, let me take my glasses off and I'll put them on you. And you say, I don't know, they're kind of germy, but you put them on anyway. They don't help. In fact, they make things worse. They say, hey, I can't see anything now. The optometrist says, what do you mean you can't see anything? I've been using those for 2 years. They're perfect for me. Try harder. So you try harder and you can't see anything. You say, it's not working. He says, I can't believe how ungrateful you are. You come to me, I'm trying to help you out. Are you going to go back to that optometrist? Absolutely not. Because he is prescribing before he is diagnosed, before he's taken the time to listen, do the eye chart, do the examinations. Isn't it true? Have you not found this out? When somebody is talking to you sometimes, especially maybe if they're sharing some challenge in their life, you've already raced ahead to the solution. In your mind, you're thinking, you can stop talking right now. I already know what the problem is, and I've got the solution. You might not even wait. You might jump in and interrupt them. Say, have you said enough? I've been there. I've experienced that. Here's what you need to do. We listen in order to answer before we necessarily understand. So we want to tamp it down a little bit, slow it down a little bit, ask a question, listen to the answer. Look, you extroverts, you're really going to have to work at this. Now, we love you extroverts. I know you've kissed the Blarney Stone. You've got the gift and all. You can really talk. And we need the extroverts in the group because otherwise you just got a group full of introverts. It's going to be one long, awkward, silent period. So we need the talkers. But the talkers have to work harder at listening the extroverts than do the introverts. And a lot of times in a marriage, have you noticed this? That in a marriage, a lot of times you got a talker and a listener. You may have an extrovert and an introvert. In a marriage, a man or woman, who's more likely to be the talker, the man or the woman? Yes, I didn't say that, but y'all said that. And I think in general that may be true. It's the woman. I know there's exceptions, and I'm looking out there. I can see some of the exceptions. But in general, that's the case. Scott Blount was telling me in his life group, a lot of young families with children, they're trying to figure out, the whole child care piece. So there was a stretch there when they alternated who came out on what week. So the men would come out on one week when the women stayed home to take care of the kids. And then the next week, the men would stay home and take care of the kids, and the women, it would just be the women coming out to life group. Scott said that on man night, he heard some of those men say more in that 1 hour than he'd heard their whole lives before that time because they had to talk. And that's the thing. Extroverts understand this. We introverts, we're fine with you taking over and we'll sit back and let you do that because then we don't have to do anything. But you got to let us step up a little bit and share some in the conversation. So active listening. We want to bring that skill set to our life group. All right, number 2, vulnerability. We want to bring our vulnerability to the life group. James says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 12:9, so now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Now, in a good life group, you build up trust and confidence in each other over time. And really, it doesn't take that much time. And that's very healthy because then people feel free to start sharing their struggles. And that's a healing process that we all need. Sometimes we mistakenly think that we're helping other people by sharing with them our strengths. When I share with somebody else my wins. I know the secret to a happy marriage, or my family is so perfect, and we take these wonderful trips, and look how well we get along, and I'm financially successful. I've learned that secret. All my quiet time is just a mountaintop experience every day. So in sharing that, we think, I'm really helping people. Well, if something's working for you, I do want to know that. I do want to hear that. I might be able to use it, incorporate it. It might work for me. But a little of that goes a long way. And that's not necessarily the way in which we are helping others the most. Let me make a few statements here, and then I'm going to ask you a question at the end. About 8 statements, I think. Number 1, I probably cuss less than you. Number 2, I probably exercise more than you. Number 3, I'm likely more discerning and conservative with my entertainment choices than are you. Number 4, I've probably been drunk less than you. Just 0 times. I've probably done drugs less than you. I've probably smoked less than you. I probably have less body fat than you. And I've likely baptized more people than have you. Here comes the question. Are you ready? Don't answer out loud. And this is multiple choice. A, here's the question. How do you like me now? All right, that's the question. A, I'm impressed, Steve. You're amazing. I want to hang out with someone as inspiringly clean living as you. B, I'd kind of like to punch you in the nose. Or C, there's no kinda like it. I would love to punch you in the nose. All right, I'd kind of like to punch myself in the nose. You share a curated version of yourself, a curated version, where it's all strength and no struggle and no weakness. Not really helping other people that way. That's not how other people are encouraged necessarily. But when we are transparent, when we are real and authentic, and when we are vulnerable, that helps people. People can relate to that. The Apostle Paul wrote this. This is one of the great passages, I think, for the Apostle Paul, Romans 7:14. He writes, "The trouble is with me, for I am all too human, a slave to sin. I don't understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I want to do what is wrong. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do. I've discovered this principle of life, that when I want to do what is right, I inevitably do what is wrong. I love God's law with all my heart, but there's another power within me that's at war with my mind. This power makes me a slave to sin that's still within me. Oh, what a miserable person I am. Who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death?" You read something like that from the Apostle Paul, and there's other passages like that. I read one about, he's talking about his weaknesses. Do you want to punch him in the nose? Or you want to go up and give him a hug and thank you. Say, "Thank you, Apostle Paul, for sharing that, for being vulnerable, for being transparent, because I can relate to that." The big question in people's mind is not how pure you are or how clean living you are, or I am. It's in light of what I've done, in light of the sin in my life. Does God really love me? Is God really forgiving me? If people knew the real me, would they love me and would they accept me? That's the thing people want to know. Kurt Thompson, in his book, The Soul of Shame, writes, "When one member of a group risks revealing the vulnerable, broken parts of their story, several interpersonal events are put in motion. First, it takes great courage to share struggles. We see it in the speaker's face and body language, and we've all been there. But we also witness a visible softening in the listeners' bodies, leaning forward in their seats toward the speaker. Looks of compassion on their faces, kindness in their voices as they respond. As they do so, the speaker's brain assimilates this response, and with this comes less anxiety. Having taken this risk, the speaker feels less alone in the story, for telling it now includes awareness of others' emotional acceptance of what is being felt. This is not equated with acceptance of bad behavior, merely the validation of the feeling that accompanies it. With the practice of such interactions, the speaker collects a new set of memories of what it means to live vulnerably with others. To live not only as if I will be okay in the future when taking this kind of risk, but also in the present moment, I am okay. The speaker can grow in resilience, learning to loosen shame's grip on life by transparently living as often as possible. Shame is Satan's tool and weapon, and the power of shame is secrecy. And when we have a trusted group with whom we can share our lives, it breaks the power of shame. So I call that the life skill of vulnerability. We want to bring that to our life group, vulnerability. And then one third life skill, compassion. Compassion. James writes in James 2:8, "It's good when you obey the royal law as found in the Scriptures, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you favor some people over others, you're committing a sin. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you." Now, sometimes you're in a life group and the life group doesn't click for whatever reasons. There's too many extroverts, not enough introverts, or vice versa. Too many Gators, not enough Seminoles. Whatever it is, the group doesn't gel. And that's one of the nice things about the way it's set up here is we have our sign-ups twice a year. We have sign-ups right now, be in life groups for a few months, and then in January we'll sign up again. And you can, if you got the wrong group, you can shuffle and go to another group or stay with the one that you're at. But that's, to me, it's not usually the problem with life groups. The problem is they often work too well. They work too well in the sense that people get together and they form those bonds and there's trust and there's confidence and they love their life group so that they never want to leave it. They never want to leave. They're just too tight. And you say, well, Steve, isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you're looking for? Yes, to a degree, unless they become so close that they become unbreakable. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12 says, a triple braided cord is not easily broken. In other words, there's no room for someone else to come into the group. It effectively becomes a closed group. I watched a video of something that happened back in 2018 in Korea. This guy named Jake, he was live streaming. He's got a group of about 6 friends. They were in Korea. They were outside of a club, and they were hanging out together and joking and having fun, and he was recording that. And they did this. They traveled to different places and did this kind of thing. Well, a stranger walked up. It was a young woman, and they didn't know her, and she inserted herself into their group and started talking with them as if she'd known them all of her life. And at first they thought, well, that's kind of rude. We don't even know who you are. But then she surreptitiously whispered to the members of the group, there's a guy back here who's been following me, a stranger in the streets, been following me for half an hour. He's creepy. I'm scared. Will you just let me be a part of your group? And of course they said, yeah. They just accepted her in, enveloped her, started talking to her like they were lifelong friends. He hung around for a few minutes longer, and then he finally went away. The video's a little bit too long to show you, but he finally went away, and then they took her to the police station. And Jake in the video said, it very well could be that we saved that girl's life that night. And I thought, wow, that could be a metaphor for the value of life groups, a metaphor that when we've found something valuable, whether it's the gospel, the good news of the gospel, or we found a great church that we want to be a part of, or we've gotten into a life group and we say, this is fantastic, we love our life group and the friendships and the confidence and the trust that we have here, we remember there are other people that need what we have. They need what we have. We have to have the compassion sometimes to leave that group, or at least multiply that group that is growing to the point where it's losing the small group dynamic, and multiply that into 2 groups so there's always room for someone new, the person who's not here. Now, Ben Merrill. Ben Merrill may be a name that's known to some of you. I know we have a couple, as a matter of fact, in our church. I can't remember who it was who have attended Ben Merrill's church in the past. But let me tell you a little bit about his background. Ben Merrill is a preacher in the Christian Church. He passed away last year. I think it was in October, in his 90s. But his nickname was Mr. Church Growth because he knows a lot about church growth. He helped to grow a large, healthy church in Fullerton, California. It was a mega church. He retired from that church, Eastside Christian, at the age of 65. But he didn't get his fishing pole. He didn't get his golf clubs. He wanted to stay active in the Lord's work. He accepted a call to serve at Harvester Christian Church, about 140 people in St. Charles, Missouri. The average age of that church was 29. Ben was 65 when he started there, so he's like their spiritual grandfather. Over the next 18 years, Harvester Christian grew to over 3,000 people. And Ben said one of the most satisfying experiences of his life was to help grow a mega church in his retirement years. He was 83 when he stepped aside as the preacher of Harvester Christian. But Ben traveled to church growth conferences and lectured on church growth principles. I heard him one time. The one principle that I remember was this one. He said a church in their life groups, as you grow in the life group, needs to be willing to break fellowship from time to time. And it's this thing that he was talking about. Willing to leave that group and be a part of another group so that there's room to accept other people. In 2 Kings chapter 7, we read about the Arameans who had besieged the city of Samaria. So it had been months. The Israelites living in Samaria were dying of starvation. The Arameans are out on the outside. They got them trapped, and there are 4 men. They happen to have leprosy inside the city, and they were talking to each other, and they said, you know what? Tonight we're going to sneak out. We're going to sneak out of this city and throw ourselves on the mercy of the Aramean army. They may kill us, but maybe they'll take us prisoner and give us something to eat because we're going to die of starvation if we stay here. So that's what they did. That night they snuck out of the city. Meanwhile, The Bible says that God had caused the Aramean army to hear the sound of what they thought was a marching army, a great army marching against them. The Arameans panicked, and in the middle of the night, they fled their encampment. They left everything behind, their tents, their weapons, their food, their money, everything. So that's what the lepers found when they came to the Aramean camp, an abandoned camp. So here's what happened. 2 Kings 7:8. When the men with leprosy arrived at the edge of the camp, they went into one tent after another, eating and drinking wine. And they carried off silver and gold and clothing, and they hid it. And finally, though, they said to each other, "This is not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come on, let's go back and tell the people at the palace." And that's what they did. And they opened the city gates, and the people were saved. Sometimes you find a good thing. I mean, the gospel is a good thing. It's good news. A great church is a good thing. A strong life group is a good thing. But we can never have the attitude, "Hey, I've got mine. I've got mine. That's all I need to do." It must always be, we've got good news. We need to share it with others. Open it up and share it with others. Jesus said, John chapter 10, "I'm the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and they know me, just as my Father knows me, and I know the Father, so I sacrifice my life for the sheep." But he said, "I have other sheep too that are not in this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock with one shepherd." Intentional churches, that book says, a healthy church has what he calls a great commission engine. Catalytic Sunday services, life-changing relationships, that's what we're emphasizing here in the life groups, and surrendered living. Those are the three pistons. And they're all driven by that crankshaft of the one sheep that's not yet in the fold, like Jesus said. I have other sheep. They need to come into the flock.